when you are, so you can go right ahead.
Great. Yes, we can
follow your
jump
lead.
on. Yeah. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us here today with this fun topic where today we're going to talk about words for photographers. Wanted to introduce myself. I'm Brian Sheffield. I've met a lot of you, if not all of you, before, but I'm a senior producer here at Wonderful Machine. And joining me today to talk about these words are two of our editors, Varun Ragopathy and Victoria Kaggle. What's up, guys? Just as a general overview, as photographers, I think we're all very visual people. But as we've seen more and more lately, words have become second place to the images we create. And so we're trying to bring that back and help to use these words to talk about our images more and describe who we are. And that's whether it's in our bios, whether it's in our social media, whether it's in our talking to clients and pitching our projects to them. So today we're going to go over some of those opportunities that we all have to use words and the best practices that we found that are really successful. So a little intro about our two editors here. Varun, how are you, Varun?
Hi, doing well, Brian. Nice to be with you.
Varun is a Philly dude. He has his BA in journalism from Syracuse University, and then he came back to Philly soon after, where he currently lives in West Philadelphia. Throughout his career, Varun has covered Major League Baseball, written how-to content for WikiHow, and has also been a sports broadcaster. Varun's role here at Wonderful Machine has led him to write no less than 1 million blog articles for our site, as well as work with photographers on their bios, marketing emailers, and pitch project copy. In his spare time, Varun, of course, loves to write, but he swears he has other interests as well that I can confirm, like cycling, baking, and board games. Victoria is London-based. How are you, Victoria?
Good, good.
Victoria was born and raised in the Italian Alps. She's a former deputy photo editor at Monocle in London and holds an MA in photography and journalism. When not writing, she loves to be out in nature with a good book, hiking mountains, climbing rocks, and a cup of coffee. So today, guys, we're going to cover bios, social media captions, blog writing, emails, publicity pitches, estimates, treatments, and creative calls, and tons more that you guys can call out or write about in the chat. I'll be monitoring the chat for questions as we're going here, so please throw up any questions, and certainly we can open this up to a question and answer at the end. And with that, Varun, would you like to get started?
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us. I see some familiar faces, people that I've worked with over the last couple of years, and some new faces as well. It's really nice to continue to talk with people within the Wonderful Machine community, especially about words, which is definitely one of, if not my main passion. I really like to write in my spare time as well, and anything to do with words is good by me. So super happy to be able to present. For me, I'm going to cover the website bio and just generally the social media bio. And then I'm going to go into social media captions, not just Instagram, but other outlets as well. And then finally, I'll wrap up with blog writing before I turn it over to Vicky to do a couple different subjects like project pitches and emailers and the like. So I just wanted to start with the website bio, which can act as like a first impression for somebody who's visiting your site, be it a photo editor, be it another photographer, somebody who wants to get to know more about you in terms of who you are as a person, your background, maybe even your career path. And really the first issue or aspect of writing a bio that comes up is how do you talk about yourself without sounding arrogant? You don't want to sound full of yourself. You obviously want to have that self-confidence that says, I can get any commission done. I can do the job well. But you don't want to do it in a pompous manner or an arrogant manner. And for me, one of the ways that I think you can sort of mitigate that when talking about yourself is to add a lot of personal information, some upbeat background information that kind of humanizes you in a sense. Something about, one of the things I'm a big fan of as I just read photographer bios is the first time you picked up a camera. I really like that. I know it can kind of be cliche, but at the same time, it gives me, the reader, a sense of why you got into this, why you love this, and what that first experience was like. You know, for some people, their parents were creatives and they gave them a camera when they were young. And for other people, they were really adjacent and then they found their love of photography that way. And so just a small sort of primer that lets us know, hey, I started by being someone who was curious about photography, and I really, really did enjoy like picking up a camera when I was 3 years old. I think a little story like that goes a long way. And I think it adds to this idea that, a client, when they look at your portfolio, someone who could potentially hire you, they can use that portfolio as a way to size up your photographic abilities. Your bio doesn't necessarily need to describe the skills that you bring, although it's good to have things like, your approach, or maybe your approach to like lighting or interacting with subjects, depending on what your photographic specialties are. But at the same time, I'm just a big fan of background information and just kind of letting the reader get to know you as a person. And you also want to show these just a robot who takes pictures. You're somebody with interests outside of photography. You're someone with interests related to photography. And in introducing yourself through this bio, you also give people a chance to, think about what it would be like to work with you, be on set with you, or just, interact with you via Zoom before, during, or after a shoot. So a lot of personal background information is great, but at the same time, you do want to keep things fairly short and sweet. We have a couple of different articles that kind of explain the different types of photography bios. You can do a longer bio that's a couple of paragraphs. That will work. You can do a medium bio that's kind of one longer paragraph. And then some people like to do short and sweet, just a couple of bullet points that list their favorite life experiences or their other interests. Like it could be baking, or it could be hiking or biking or something like that. But any of those lengths, short, medium, long, can work. It's just all about if it works for you. If it sounds to you, then you can go ahead and run with it. Obviously, push comes to shove, you probably want a shorter bio, just because, people that are going through your website, your portfolio, they're not going to have a ton of time. They're going to be looking at other portfolios, other websites, and they're not going to want to sit there and read your whole life story. But again, if it works for you, if you feel like you have something really interesting and compelling to share about your background, go right ahead and make sure that you do that. And then in terms of your bio in your other on your other social media platforms, you should take elements of the main website bio and apply it to different platforms, be it Instagram, Twitter, or LinkedIn. And based on what the social media is, you should make sure that you tailor it to that. So what do I mean by that? So the example that we use in our Writing a Photographer bio article, which just came out on our site today, Matt Odom, one of our members, has a really good way of approaching this. He has a really interesting photographer bio where he talks about being a fan of Arsenal, the soccer team based in London. He also talks about being a fan of comic books. And like those two pieces of information are really interesting, but they're not necessarily for LinkedIn. So if you go to Matt's LinkedIn bio, then you'll find that he lists his specialties and also his client list. And I think it's really like businessy and like gets to the point. Whereas if you go to his Twitter, he has those same like, oh, I'm an Arsenal fan, I'm a comic book enthusiast. And because Twitter's bio setup makes you need to make it shorter, he just takes those interesting little aspects and puts them in to his Twitter bio. And so he does a really nice job of keeping the information the same, which is good for brand recognition and just making sure that people are familiar with you and your work. But it also is tailored based on the tone. LinkedIn more serious, Twitter and Instagram a little bit more fun and upbeat. The big question, Vicky, I want to bring you for this is the question of third person versus first person. Third person would be me being like, Varun is this and he does this. First person, of course, is I am this and I do this. So Vicky, we see a good mix of both. What's your take on first person versus third person?
Yeah, that's the tricky question, isn't it? I think it comes down to how you feel most confident, how you feel you feel more at ease describing yourself. It's really up to the individual. I think perhaps when you start in third person, be a little bit more mindful that it could quickly sound a little bit, it's easier to sound self-aggrandizing perhaps. But again, if you keep it relevant and you keep it short and sweet and sort of follow the guidelines that you gave before, I think it can still work really well. I think whether you choose first or second, definitely be mindful that's the key aspect, because again, as you mentioned, you don't want a full autobiography on your website, because nobody's going to have time to read that, unfortunately. Mm-hmm. So I mean, go with your gut, I suppose. What sounds best to you?
Yeah, definitely. And I think one of the themes when it comes to writing in general is have fresh eyes on your work. We're going to continue to harp on that through the hour. But if someone looks at your bio, your third person bio, and goes, maybe it's a little bit, pompous, then definitely take that into account, because even if one person has that impression, a bunch of other people could have that impression as well, including photo editors. And while they are going to mostly be judging you on the strength of your portfolio, it's good to leave that good first impression, a good taste in their mouth, as someone who's like, hey, this is a humble, hardworking individual. They clearly care about the collaborative process. And so again, it's about what's best for you in terms of the length and the perspective, but make sure that you get fresh eyes on it, and that other people see, like, especially your friends, right? They know who you are. They're your friends because they really like you. And you want to make sure that they hear your voice and hear who you are in that bio. You don't want to sound like someone you're not. Sound authentic to yourself. And so if that is third person, great, that works. And then at the same time, if it doesn't, then go with the first person. So now we'll move to social media captions. And of course, Instagram is the most important social media when it comes to photographers, and really it's the most popular. And so it's taken over as the social media of note for people who want to get their images out there, of course. And while the images themselves are really important, the captions are as well. Those first 2-3 sentences, like 125 characters, you got to make sure that they're compelling, or they're just like a prompt. I was looking at Stephen Matera's Instagram, and we have noted on our Words for Photographers expert advice article that he is someone who has a really big Instagram following. And one thing that I like that he did with a recent post is he said, he gave us a prompt. It was a picture, I believe, of a mountain range. And he said, what do you think's better, this shot in color or this shot in black and white? And because he asked that, and you can only see one image, you have to scroll to the next one to see what it looks like in black and white. This is a really good way to engage the audience, get their responses, and see what they're thinking about your work. And Vicky, I think that goes to like the idea that Instagram lets you put multiple posts on one, or multiple images on one post. And that's probably better for your timeline and for your output than a bunch of like one image Instagram posts, because you don't want to flood anyone's timeline. That might lead to them unfollowing you. Would you agree?
Yeah, and it's really nice, I think, as a commissioning photo editor, to just see a narrative of the project that you've completed, see a few shots from the same project, and sort of, it just speaks more to your ability to get the job done as well, like that's been commissioned to you, and the type of shots that you are able to get. So, and it works really well with a nice caption, I think, as you were saying that. I mean, I'm sure you'll touch on this, but yeah, just a few information on the project, it's always helpful.
Yeah, and you were also mentioning yesterday, you like when a photographer tags a client or someone they worked with. Maybe they're telling a story about working with the client or about working with somebody on the crew, tagging them, getting them in the image as well. So it gives the viewer a better sense of the whole project and the whole story. Context is really important, and that's where the caption comes into play. It can help you tell the story of either an image that you got, a commission that you worked on, or just anything related to what you're posting. And I do want to harp on the concept of not over posting. I see a lot of photographers, they'll post like one thing per day, one thing every couple of days. That's a really nice rate. And then the other aspect is your caption length. And I just want to touch on this real quick. This is about finding your voice. So if you like the longer captions, the couple paragraphs that tell the story and it works for you, go with it. But some people will just like take a picture and then they'll label it like, this is a picture of a building I took, and this is tagging the organization that works there. Here's why this picture is interesting to me. It's really up to you in terms of your caption length. But what I would say is keep it consistent. So if somebody goes to your Instagram page, they should know that they're hearing from you, and they can kind of hear your voice as you continue to just build up that social media following. And if you do get a large following, you can be a little bit more flexible with how you post and when you post and what you put on there. But to start, you're obviously going to want to finalize that voice, and the caption is a big part of that in terms of the structure of it, the hashtags, the tags themselves, and if you prompt the reader or the viewer with a question, or if you just tell a story about a behind the scenes aspect. And yeah, that's obviously very important as Instagram continues to be a huge factor just in the world of photography in general. In fact, Instagram and social media kind of took over the personal blog, which we're talking about now, which is still important, of course. The blog is not as prevalent maybe as it was, 10, 15 years ago with the rise of social media, but it's still really important. And the one thing that I really like about blog writing is that it allows you to look more critically at your own work. So maybe you're just, thinking about a shoot that you did and you're just writing down some ideas, some takeaways that you had. The more you write, the more you can kind of flesh out your creative process and think, wow, what if I approach this differently? What if I looked at trying to get this shot differently? And you can like talk to yourself through a blog, because with social media, it's really quick and you have to factor in the brevity character limit. But with a blog, you don't have to do that. And so it's a nice way to personally like be introspective, to get better at what you're doing. And at the same time, it's another way to generate traffic to your website, because if you have a separate blog, then you can post that on social media and get more people looking at your site. What I would say about blog writing is you want to aim for one post per month to start. And, this isn't something that you have to do. So if you are going to write blogs, you should do it consistently. If you cannot commit the time, then it's probably not in your best interest, because sometimes I go to photographer websites and I click on the blog section and it hasn't been updated in like 6 months. And that's not the best look, because it's not that you're not working hard. It's just that you don't have the time to commit to this. So start with one post per month, keep it around 1,000 to 1,200 words. That takes the average human about 4 minutes to read. So 4 or 5 minutes of time is not a large amount of time. And then of course, we're creatives, and for photographers, make it image heavy, put a lot of images in those blog posts. And this gives you the opportunity to get other images that maybe didn't make it to past the final deliverable process. And you can put them on your site and you can talk about why you think they're special and important. And again, it gives you another chance to really expand your thoughts on your own work in a way that social media doesn't allow for. And that's why blog writing is still vital, and it's still a great way to share stories. It's also a good way to share behind the scenes stories of different shoots and the like. You can talk about aspects of the photography industry that's on your mind. It doesn't just have to be recapping a shoot. It can be anything. And it can also be like a movie review, or just maybe a book that you read. Another way for you to show off your personality and your other interests can be done through blogging. And if people continue to read your work, they'll continue to hear your voice. And yeah, it's just a good way for you to not only get your work out there, but to improve your writing abilities. And just by typing things down, writing a blog, maybe you get better at writing those emailers, those project pitches, those different things that Vicky's going to be talking about. So I will hand it over to Vicky to get into things like emailers and project pitches. And Vicky, the floor is yours. Thanks everybody for listening. And I'll be jumping in to talk more about different things. But yeah, Vicky.
Thank you, Aaron. Yes, I'll jump straight into emailers, actually. I think email is a tool for any photographers to get your work seen and sort of stay on the radar of your clients, whether these are clients that you've worked with before or clients that you have sort of had the first connection and sent out an introduction emails, but you want to remind them of your work. First and foremost, if I'm sending out an email, I would consider why, the reason why you're sending out this specific email to your client list. And this can be, it could be a new website that you're launching. It could be a blog, as Varun was mentioning, a new blog post that you like to share. Or a lot of the times a photographer will want to show a recent project to the client list. So a project that you shot for a different client, or a self-assigned project. Once you have that clear and you know what you're doing, then sort of how you craft and put together the email will sort of follow from that. One thing to keep in mind is also that you're really competing for attention here. So you are dealing with a person that is likely overwhelmed by the amount of emails that they get on a daily basis. So keep that in mind when you're deciding what to include in the email, what to leave out. So definitely, I would say keep it concise, keep it relevant. You really want to just leave in the information that will add something to your clients and to showing your skills to them. So don't forget to keep your logo or your branding consistent when you're starting out, but definitely follow with either a catchy headline or a title, something that refers to the project and catches that attention right away and sort of in a fun or interesting way, followed by a very catchy or interesting picture for the project that you're sharing. This could be the strongest image or a more fun image, colorful images, something that again engages the attention of your client and sort of keeps it wanting to read more. Now here text in your email would sort of function in support of your visuals because that's what you're really pushing out to your client to see. So again, it would never be something the length of a blog post, say. It would be something that would sort of be a paragraph introducing what the project is about or what the website update is about or the blog post. And it can still be a good way to highlight in an indirect way your skills. So be quite clever on what you decide to include. So say you've done a project with a crew and this is a crew that you work with quite often or you worked well with. You might want to decide to maybe give a little shout out here like you would on an Instagram post. This is something that just requires a few words, nothing special, but it really reminds your clients in a way that you're a person that is quite used to working with a crew, that it's comfortable working with a team on set and managing a set. So you might think if this is a daily aspect of your practice, you might think this is something quite common, but it's a skills that you have and other practitioners might not. So it might be good to remind your clients of that. But this being said, I would say follow this body of text with the visuals, of course, a selection of 4 or 5 images, depending on the project and the images themselves. But that's sort of what you want to show again. Don't take advantage, don't miss the opportunity to sort of conclude the emailer with a call to action to your reader, your clients. If they made it this far down the email, you got their attention, you got their interest. So take advantage of it, leave some links and sort of a little description of where they can tell more about the project or other stuff that you've been looking at, other work that you've been doing. Definitely don't miss the opportunity. Now again, you're competing for attention, as mentioned, and we had a little bit of a discussion with Varun the other day about something that I often struggle with, which is subject lines for emails. And you had quite a good example, didn't you?
Yeah. And it's listed in the Words for Photographers article, and we can share that afterward. But it's from Jody Horton, and he does a nice monthly newsletter. And the subject line for the one from September 2020 was a mofo for Zebco, MOFO. And we all know that, or most of us know that is, that's alluding to an expletive. But if you see the word mofo in your subject line, you're gonna be like, huh, what is that? What is that? Zebco is the name of a client. And so it rhymed as well. But just from that small little excerpt, I'm thinking, I wonder what this is about. And then we went through that emailer, and to Vicky's point, it was really concise in terms of the information. Jody listed out just the statistics, the number of crew, the number of days, the equipment that they used. It was very easily digestible information that kind of discussed pretty succinctly how big of an endeavor it was. It was a mofo. And so I think it was really well summed up by Jody. And just, again, it caught my attention because that subject line is not cut and dry. It's not cliche at all. And so, yeah, that's really the headline there, and if you want people to click and look through, you got to be able to sell them from right away. And so that subject line does play a big role alongside some quality imagery, of course.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, definitely.
I think there's a fine line too that, people can ride between, like, new work from Vicky and mofo for Zebco or some kind of, clickbait like that. Nadia asked a great question here in the chat, but I think that I'm going to ask Nadia the question. Nadia asked, what are our thoughts on an email that provides an overview of your work versus a specific project? So an emailer that shows a couple different things you've been up to lately versus an emailer that just says, hey, new work for Adidas, here's the project. Nadia, what do you think? Because we've seen them both.
Okay.
I'm sure you guys have seen these. I see mailers from photographers pretty much every day. Some of them are like, hey, here's what I've been up to this fall, or happy spring. Here's what I've been doing the last 3 months. And then there's ones that we see more frequently that say new project for Adidas, new project for Under Armour. Here's the crew I work with. Here's how I got the job. Here's where I shot it. Nadia, let's hear your expert advice on this marketing.
Yeah, so I'm just trying to get some hints because Tina and I, hi Tina, are working on an emailer for her on our marketing partner this month, and I think Tina tends towards the longer descriptions. I tend towards smaller, so you kind of covered that, but we are thinking more right now rather than a specific project to share, like her updated portfolios and I think it's fine, but you kind of have me thinking about the pros and cons of, is it better to share something that's more streamlined, and then you could share like you said, you could tag people in it, or you could share certain stats versus an overview, which is going to be more, I think, casual in terms of the content of what you're writing. It's going to be like less specific. So I think that's fine, but you guys could really help us out if you give us some
thoughts. I think it can depend on the photographer and how often you are doing email marketing. If you are sending out 4 emails a year, then yes, it should be more of a recap of what you've done to lately. I know Tina's work well, and it's pretty concise. She has all her work is very with the same common thread through it. But some photographers who do, portraiture and who do food photography and then do still life, I would recommend those not being within one email together. So I think those could go to different clients, and it could confuse a client if you have 3 different types of photography or more within one email.
That's a really good point, and actually makes a lot of sense. So you're saying sort of focus, if you're somebody who does fashion, but you also do food and interiors, kind of break those up in your overview.
Yeah, and
it's an overview.
Yeah, no, those if it's an overview, yeah, break those up and how segment those to those clients that you are marketing to. Those clients are going to have different email lists in your database, and you think you're going to be showing them different work if you are a photographer who has different specialties. But that would be my only watch out for putting multiple projects within one email, is that make sure they all paint the same picture of you as a creative and what you do and what you're good at. Does that help at all?
Yeah.
And we've kind of gotten away from.
Yes, that's super helpful. I'm just wondering, sorry, yeah, like final thing, and I guess I could turn it to Victoria and Varun. Do you feel that it's in terms of, the website versus the emailer, how much should the content, like what you're writing, be similar to what the style of writing is on your site, if that makes sense? Or can you kind of mix it up?
Yeah, I think with an email, you can afford to be a little bit less, the tone of the text itself of the email can be a little bit more laid back or more informal if you want. It's sort of a chance to also give an insight of your personality and how it would be to be working with you as a person. So I see it personally, I see it as working well, especially, and even more so if your brand itself is sort of, you're going with a more chill vibe, let's say, or a more informal vibe. Definitely bring that into the email. But even if your presentation on other platforms is more formal in the words you're using, I see the emailer as an opportunity to let your personality through in a way too, especially to give your client an idea of how it is to work with you. That could work well. Does that answered your question? Yeah, or did I go into a
No,
random
thank you
rant?
so much.
But yeah, I do agree with what Brian was saying as well, of sort of dividing the different project. If you're doing sort of an overview in your email, that would work best, in my opinion, at least. Well, I guess I'll be moving on to what happens when you're pitching a project, because what we were saying with emailers, the text again is there to support more your visuals, and what you're pushing is again your work. But when you're really pitching for a project, whether it's a commission project or a self-assigned project, your words, you really need to give time to crafting the text that you'll be sending out even more, since this is really where your idea for the project will come through and will sort of convince your client. So I would say the tone here needs to be definitely different, it needs to be professional, it needs to be clear. And the first lines are sort of the make it or break it sometimes, where in the first couple of sentences, 2-3 sentences, you really need to pack your idea in an effective way, in a memorable way. And again, sort of like with the emails, you're competing with attention and sort of the attention span of your reader and your client. So be sure to craft that carefully. And one time, well, I've been told before that sort of you should be able, in a pitch, whether you're pitching as a journalist or as a photographer, you really should be able to justify each word you're using and why you're using them. So it's really a space for being mindful of how many words you're using, even just like be really specific with how you craft those first lines. And one of the first things you want to be addressing moving on, it's why should your client care about that project? Because that's one of the questions that they will ask themselves right away. Why do I care about this story? Why do I care about this project idea? And that's sort of answering also the question, why should their audience care? Why is this relevant to their brand? So be sure to address that quite quickly and move on to also how is your approach unique when developing this work. You want to conclude by adding a few more information, I would say, or expand a little bit on the idea as well. But again, be careful in how many details you go into here. This is not really the space where you want to go into lengthy descriptions or be very descriptive and how everything will develop. Be mindful of keep it concise and keep it relevant, and sort of I would say base it on the idea of an elevator pitch. So you have a limited amount of time to get your idea through to the person, and that's sort of your only chance. So dedicate enough time before you send it out. And as said before, a good idea is to sort of have a few set of eyes looking at this before you send it. If your pitch is successful, you are likely to be asked for an estimate or a treatment if the project is a larger project, or you can be asked to just bid on a project that a client thinks you are quite suited for. And you might have done this plenty of times already, or it might be your first times, but the general idea is that an estimate would be enough for a smaller project. So that would go with your estimate of cost, your terms and conditions, along with your cover page out to the client. Now with bigger projects, of course, you're likely to be asked to submit a full treatment. If this is like the first treatment that you sent out, can be a little bit daunting, but then the structure is generally the same of what needs to be included. But one thing I definitely appreciate, and I think it's a good idea, is if it's the first time you're working with a client, especially, it's quite a nice touch and a nice idea to send out a full treatment, even if you're not asked for. It just shows, it goes without saying, but it just shows your client that you're really willing to go the extra mile and you're really excited about the project and interested in it. I would go and start straight with your cover letter and sort of a few paragraphs introducing yourself. And this is really where you express your interest, your enthusiasm for the work, and you also show and remind the client about your credentials, your skills. And you want to follow that with your approach, how your approach is different and how you plan to sort of develop the project. Now, I would always suggest when you're crafting this text, have the creative brief right next to you and sort of address the different points there. It shows your clients, if you're addressing most of it or all of it, it really shows your client that you have done your research, you're set to go, and you understand the creative briefing, the creative brief that you've been submitted. Now, of course, you're a photographer, so you want to include sample images. You might go all out and work with a mood board, depending on how you work best. That's definitely up to you. You might even decide to include a little description of the crew that you'll be working with, especially if it's a crew that you've worked with before, and sort of highlight the different members. Again, you remind the client and sort of give that assurance that you know how to manage a set, manage a team, and that's often what's required for you for the bigger projects. So a good idea to sort of have a space in there to mention that. Of course, terms and conditions, as always, include those. Now, up to you whether you want the estimates of cost as part of the treatment. That's sort of up to the single in person, or up to it depends, it can depend on the different project. I know that me and Brian had a little discussion on this a couple of days back, and he sort of convinced me that it's a good idea to have it separate, right, Brian?
Yeah, we were discussing this the other day, and how are you incorporating your estimate, your costs for everything, and your fees within the treatment PDF. I like to see those separately. They can be in the same email delivery to the client, but I like to see those as separate files. So there's like let's say a PDF of your treatment and then a PDF of your estimate. I like to see them separately because they will both change, sometimes independently of one another, and can be updated. Also, if you're working with an advertising agency, those the artwork and the creative is going to be forwarded on to a certain group of people, and the money info is going to be supported onto a certain group of people. And the creative director or art director don't necessarily care how much it costs, and the finance team doesn't necessarily care what it's going to look like, just that their creative team has approved it and signed off on it. So that's my thoughts on keeping those two as separate attachments in your delivery email. And in this too, we were talking about, and this goes back to the project pitches. I think there's project pitches in different things. There's some where you're saying, hey, here's this work I've made. Do you want to publish it? Or, hey, here's this work I've made, advertising agency, do you want to run it on a billboard? And here's how much it could cost. And then there's project pitches where it's, hey, assistant, that normally costs $450 a day. I have this thing, I know I can't afford you, I only have $250. Can you do it? You're still using words to talk to this person about a project. And then also, Vicky brought up a good point that I wanted to add on too about discussing your crew in your treatment. I think that's really, really good idea when there's a specialized part of your crew, whether it's a skilled drone operator that's going to get this shot through the Grand Canyon that you need, or whether it's a experienced food stylist that the client is really going to love and help sign off on the shoot. I've seen a lot of photographers not want to wax big on those specialized people within their treatment because I feel like it's, they may lose the job, or they're talking about someone else instead of their self within that treatment. But I wouldn't worry about that. Like, you're already at the part where you're putting together a treatment. You've already had these hopefully creative calls with the client. So it's okay to talk about these specialists that you're going to be hiring. They're your vendors. You know, you're going to be paying them and hiring them for the shoot. So I wouldn't worry about that too much. You know, you don't have to talk about your second assistant and how good they are holding the C-stand or the, you know, but I think if it's a food stylist or a wardrobe stylist or a skilled drone operator or a DP or someone that is going to help make your shoot better than it was 5 minutes ago, they should be discussed. Yeah. Thanks, Vicky. Sorry.
No, yeah, I definitely agree with what you're saying, especially if it's somebody that's going to contribute massively, like a food stylist or a drone operator to your, it's basically a teamwork. Yeah, definitely mention them and a few lines just describing their practice and who they are.
Yeah.
It goes a long way, I think. I think this sort of sums up where the main or some of the main aspects where you will be required to sort of put words to work as a photographer. Another thing that it's worth mentioning, I think, is the creative calls that you are likely to get, whether it's usually after a treatment is successful or an estimate is successful, but or pitching a project. It's not words in writing, but it's definitely a way.
Sorry, I just wanted to stick on
Hello?
estimate for a second. Do you mind?
Yeah.
Um,
No.
I definitely wanted to touch on terms and conditions of your estimate and how important that is. And make sure that everyone knows that. I mean, that is, you know, these are words that you're using to describe to the client of what you know, basically the description of this and the estimate is, hey client, here's what I'm going to give you, and then line items of how much it's going to cost, and then the terms and conditions are filling the blanks with everything else. Here's when the images are due, here's when the payment is due, here's what happens if you don't pay me or I don't give you the images you need. And that stuff is super important to make sure you have in your estimate. We help photographers every day with those terms and conditions also. But most photographers we've seen have their own version of them as well. Sorry, Vicky, I just want to jump in while we're still on estimates there.
Yeah, and I think it also shows the better those are crafted and clear. It really shows the client your professionality in the sense that you're ultimately setting everything on the table and protecting them as much as you're protecting yourself and sort of the relationship. So it's definitely a crucial part to have done, and always in your estimates, your treatments, anything that you sent out to your client as far as projects. But yeah, no, just a last thought on creative calls, and just to say that that's really where your words will sort of present you for the first time to your client in person, likely. It's sort of the moment where your client, you sit down, or you'll be on a phone call or a Zoom call, as they're so popular lately, with a team. This will be your creative director, likely, possibly again the client, and a few other members of the creative department. And I would say this can be a little bit daunting at times, intimidating perhaps, but if you have a good understanding of your treatment that you have submitted and of why you want to be doing the project and why you're the right person, then really let the rest be up to, like, showing your enthusiasm, and especially let the person in front of you know why it's good to be working with you, because ultimately that's what they also want to see, that you're a person that's nice to be on a full 3-day shoot or however long it's going to be, and it's nice to be working with you. So definitely let the personality through on a creative call. Don't just let the nerves take over, if that makes sense. But yeah.
Can I jump in for a second? Yeah, I feel like we've talked about this, but when you get to the point of a creative call, you know, it's generally down to you and a couple of the photographers that are up for the shoot. Everyone knows your work already. They've seen your body of work. They think you're good enough for the shoot that they're, you know, spending time on a call with you. So to your point, Vicky, it's extremely important that is just a, you know, it's kind of like a first date situation. Hey, I understand this project. I know what's going on. Here's how I'm going to capture it. Here's, these things we can discuss creatively together to help get what you need, client. But yeah, I think that you should, any meeting you're called to, any creative call, they already like your work. You don't have to worry about that. It's just about, selling yourself as a person and as a human being and as a creative in the room.
Definitely. And yeah, it's true. Like if you made it that far, they know what you're capable. They like your work. Yeah, they know what you can do. It's just a matter of show them that you can do it for them and you're the right person. And I guess one last thing to mention about, and we've touched upon this a couple of times, is again, this can be said enough, but anything you're planning to post that is quite of maybe not a Instagram caption that might not be necessary, but for anything bigger and more permanent, definitely let a good set of eyes on, and copy editing is key, and just get a few people that you trust to have a read and have a look at it.
I just had also one more thing to add on the back of the creative call, which is that, like you guys said, if you make it that far, the client clearly respects your work and clearly thinks highly of it. And maybe you don't get that you don't land that gig, but being friendly and amicable on that call, that will leave a good impression. So next time around, if a commission comes up, that client's going to be like, well, I had a really good conversation with that person. It didn't quite work out this time, but I know this person's work is good. And I know that they're really friendly and they seem like someone who'd be great to work with. So, every kind of aspect of this not only allows you to put yourself in a good position for the current commission, but also for future ones. You leave that good impression, and that person that might need to make another hiring decision a couple months down the road is going to remember you for your, gregarious nature, for your just collaborative attitude.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that happens quite often, actually, that because they have to make one choice. They can only choose one for that specific project, but they might go straight to you for the next ones if you still match the required and the style matches. Yeah. I think I'll leave it back to you, Brian, and sort of pass the mic back to you.
Yeah, thanks, guys. I appreciate your, all your expert advice on these subjects. I think now is a great time to open up to questions that we can talk about all these things, from website bio to social media to blog writing, email or project pitches. We also went over estimates, treatments, and creative calls. Marcia has a question that I think would be good for the group, and also Nadia, I think this would be good for you. Marcia, can you hear me?
Yes, I'm here.
Hey. Marcia was saying that she keeps hearing more and more that art buyers and editors in interviews saying that they don't like MailChimp or other mass email services, and wondering about that. And I guess the question is, has anyone else heard that? And Marcia, what specific have these people said about the mass emailers, mass email services? And then to further that on, Marcia was questioning whether it's mass emails versus direct emails to clients, straight from your inbox.
Yeah, so basically a lot of it was just saying they prefer a much more tailored personal email rather than getting just kind of a mass blast email.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd always planned to do a combination of both, more tailored maybe for people that I either have a relationship with already or some sort of communication where it would seem awkward to be introducing myself, but then doing the mass emails to people I've never had any contact with and doing more of a general intro. So I don't, and obviously I haven't heard this from everyone. I've just been hearing it a lot. So obviously a lot of people have different opinions. A lot of people like to receive communications differently, but it's just kind of left me in paralysis mode. So any feedback would be helpful.
Yeah, has it left you in paralysis mode? Why? Are you afraid of upsetting someone?
I guess not knowing which one to do, because it feels to me like I have a lot of different buckets of like the personal ones and the mass ones. But if I want to do less of the mass emails and do individual ones, than to kind of really tailor each one, just more time consuming, and get myself kind of on a schedule where I'm doing X amount per week. And it just feels overwhelming versus like one mass email.
Hey, Brian, can I
can-
jump in?
Oh, sorry.
Absolutely.
Having been on the other side of a lot of these emails, I think the benefit of MailChimp style email is that for the recipient, there's no pressure. Like if they ignore, if they just sort of click, look at it for 5 seconds and click to delete, there's no guilt. If you get an email that looks like an individual tailored email, it's like, I got to respond to this person. I don't have time for this. So I think that actually in MailChimp, like a beautifully designed MailChimp emailer that emphasizes a little bit of snappy text and a few strong pictures, I think is welcome for any creative who feels like they need to keep tabs on what photographers are doing. So I don't see any, and not because I'm trying to sell MailChimp or email marketing, but I just feel like it's the most efficient, cost efficient way that photographers can get the word out about their photography. And there is a platform called Yesware. And there are other platforms that you can actually mimic individual emails, but send out hundreds at a time. And that's a tool that we've utilized at different times. And it's something you could consider if you want to send out lots of emails, but have them appear to be individual customized emails. You can do that. But it's but I don't really see any downside to sending out a MailChimp email.
It's super helpful. Thank you.
Nadia and I have had tons of conversations about this, and a couple months ago, Nadia did a whole member open house about email marketing that I don't know if you have seen, Marsha, but we can send you a link to that for sure. But we recommend both of them, do those mass emailers and then sit down each month when you have time and send out as many personalized ones as you can, whether that's 10 or 30 each month direct to that person. The mass email ones are, we'll just say mass emails, MailChimp now. What that's going to do is remind these people of your name over and over again. So even like Bill suggested that they said, I don't have time for this, hit delete, which, we all do every day with these emails that come in. You're seeing that, I know that J. Crew is having a sale and CVS has a $2 off coupon going on today, but I didn't open those emails. So I think that's important too, that just that name recognition, this is coming through, and if those emails get open, they see your work coming through. Nadia, anything to add to that?
Yeah, you guys kind of, well, basically, I think we had a lot of conversations about this internally, and I like the way I think Bill put it one time, that the email or the MailChimp, Flowdesk, whatever it is that you use, it's like a brand awareness, sort of exactly what Brian just said, and you see stuff and you register it very quickly, and you'd be surprised. It's just basically, it's like billboard advertising in a way that you can do. And to Bill's point, people don't feel pressure to respond to it. And okay, so they'll delete it or archive it or whatever, but it's there, And then when you reach out with an individual email, it's just that much more likely that they'll respond to your request for a meeting or a phone call. I'll just quickly say, I discovered, aside from Yesware, this morning, yet another mail merge. I think it's yamm.com is great because it allows you lots of emails that look like individual emails, but also you can add an unsubscribe button at the bottom in case you're emailing in the EU or something like that, where there are more strict rules. So just so you know.
And Nadia, you could probably find it faster than I did. Are you able to throw your the link to your member open house about email marketing in the chat here?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Yeah. Did that help, Marsha?
Very much so. Thank you.
Okay, good. Joe Bradley has a interesting question here. Joe, how are you? Do you want to chime in and talk about this, or would you like me to read it?
Hey, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, hey,
So,
how you
man,
doing?
how are
Good, how you doing?
you? Good.
So yeah, Butterball reached out to me last month. I'm in North Carolina about shooting some local farmers for their national campaign for their turkeys or whatever. And I had a conference call with the ad agency and the producer, and they basically didn't say anything and was very quiet and very dry. And it's just like, how do you deal with people when I feel like I was doing an audition, like a monologue, instead of like interacting with people and talking. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I've been in that exact situation, and I'm sure most people have, whether that's, in a job interview or on a creative call like this or on a first date or hanging out with friends. It's totally awkward. It's weird. Um,
Yeah.
Without knowing so much about the situation, was the producer part of the agency, or was that a third party as well?
She was third party, but she was handling all the numbers and budget. I had no say so except for my own budget, and she was creating everything else for the budget. And she would send it to me for approval. Then she would get back with the ad agency, and she had a lot of fluff in the budget, like a lot of fluff and extra money that was just kind of out there, because their budget was to be under $50,000 for the whole campaign.
Mhm.
And I don't know, it was a lot of extra numbers that she was throwing in there, but I didn't really have a say so much. It was just like ad agency producer, me, I had to send in a treatment and they would look at it and then they would send it to Butterball and then kind of get back to me. That's kind of how the whole process was working.
Yeah. I mean, I kind of think that it's easier on your end. The producer knows the budget already, and then it's
Right.
saying, "Hey, Joe, this is how much we have for you and your end. Are you cool with that?"
Right.
That's less of an audition for you and less of a back and forth about, are these numbers correct? Is this, just basically becomes, can you do it and do you want to do it? And I think that
Right.
if you want to do it, would have to do with the personality. Is it does this sound like a good project? Does it sound like you'd want to be working with these people? Any of these red flags that stick out. I mean, sometimes people are just quiet, and that's why they're hiring, extroverted photographers and videographers and, designers to work on their projects, because they're just quiet. Other times I've seen in my own life that I've been up as just like a third person in a triple bid on a project. And when you get on a call to discuss it, it turns into this, oh, I don't know. Yeah, what do you think? Yeah, cool. There's no emotion involved in it.
Yeah, very dry.
It's
And
very
see,
dry.
and for me, I'm better with people in person than I am like on like a Zoom call, because it's new and it's kind of uncomfortable anyway, I think.
Yeah.
Like with person, you can just have more of interaction with someone.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think how you deal with it is, I mean, it's totally uncomfortable. Any of those situations are totally uncomfortable, but how you deal with it, I think, would just be dependent on you and the situation and who you are, what your role is there. I mean, if you already knew the numbers and how much you were getting paid, then I think your role is to be excited about the project and express how you want to capture it, and add to, the creative depth that they've already given you, and, talking about what you want to capture. But yeah, then it's just a personal decision of like, do you want to say no, thank you to this project?
And then and then a follow-up to it, the ad agency was based out of Chicago. The producer lives in North Carolina. And after she told me that he went with another photographer, she said, I'm glad to know you. She said, I would love to touch base later on. So I waited like a couple of weeks and I sent the producer a follow-up email. And she just, no response. Then I called, and I basically couldn't get no communication with her afterwards. I just
Yeah.
I don't want to bother someone, but like, how do you go about still staying in front of them without annoying them?
You mean just for possible future productions?
Yeah,
Yeah, I think that's it. I think
because I heard they're a really good person.
Say it again.
I'm saying I've heard some people say that the producer that lives here, she's a really good person to know because she gets a lot of big jobs. And so I'm just trying to make sure I stay in front of her with things, but like I can't even get a response back from her. So
Yeah, well, who let you know that you did not get the job? Was it Butterball or was it the producer?
the producer.
Yeah, then I think that, just write that producer a note. Thank you so much. Looking forward to the next one. Would love to stay on your radar and definitely do a production together. And then, then put them in your email list that they can get updates from you as to, what you're working on. And then if they are local, then for sure, when it's safe to do so, yeah, go get a drink with them or something. Take them out to dinner. Absolutely. I was telling a story to Bill a couple weeks ago, one evening, that kind of a similar situation happened years ago. I was on a big shoot for a Target shoot, and it was like an 8-day shoot, and we were like a 20-person creative kickoff in a hotel lobby in Los Angeles. And they had all the mood boards and creative direction and product and wardrobe, and here's our plan to use these photos over the next 3 years and blah blah blah. And then we're in the room, and it's like me plus 20 people, and they were just like, all right, Brian, take it from here, and they crossed their arms and all sat back in their chairs. And I was like, what are you talking about? Like, what do you mean we take it from here? And it was like the same situation as this, Joe, where they hired me. They said, here's the budget, you're the photographer, come on and take these pictures. So I had to just jump and be that person with the personality and walk through all the shoot days and walk through the talent and the wardrobe and the locations and everything we wanted to do, which I was familiar with already at that point and knew we could do it. But it was that same situation of like, hey, we're not going to handle this now. We want to see what you can do in this situation.
Gotcha.
Yeah, that's a tricky one to be in for sure. But
yeah,
I think,
Brian, just to add to that, just the idea that if that's a $100,000 or $200,000 shoot, those people want to be confident that you, as the photographer, are going to be able to take the ball and run with it. Like they don't, when they, their job is in fact done at that point. They're basically handing the job over to the photographer, and they want to feel your confidence. They want to feel like, great, I don't have to do anything. I can just show up and watch this guy do his job. That's what they want to. That's what they want to go. That's the feeling that they want to go away with when they finish that creative call. Is wow, Joe can handle this shoot.
Yeah.
So like, I guess my struggle sometimes is coming across confident without sounding cocky. You know what I mean? It's like a fine line, I think, to say this guy's he's cocky, or like, oh, he's got confidence and he's really cool. You know what I mean? It's like I feel like it's a fine line between.
Yeah, but I think if you emphasize the enthusiasm, I think first and foremost they want to hear your enthusiasm, that you understand the project, you're interested in doing the project, and you're capable of doing the project. That's what they need to feel.
Okay.
Yeah, and also that you're not going to say yes to something that you can't necessarily do.
Gotcha.
You can say no to things, or you can say, oh, let me do some research, or oh, I'd love to discuss more than that. I think the cockiness comes when you say, yeah, I got it. We can walk on water. Yeah, I got it. We can, do this or that. We can do some practice. It's like, let's talk about this together. Sometimes helps with, bringing down the cockiness to a confident level.
Gotcha.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, we're at 3:00 here, everyone. Is there any other questions anyone wants to jump in and chat about with Varun and Vicky about words that we can use to promote our work?
Brian, I got one more thing for you. Can you hear me, Brian?
I can hear you, yeah.
Everyone.
All right, so I had an interesting phone call earlier this week with a photographer, Richard Moran. I think we showed his bio on the bio expert advice article, and we look at so we get about 15 to 20 photographer inquiries every week at Wonderful Machine. So we read all those bios. So we just see a ton of about pages and bios. And one of the things that I see a lot of is that I think one of the sort of the most common mistakes that I see photographers make is when they are emphasizing themselves too much in a bio. I think it's important to talk about yourself in a bio, but I think that sort of communicating the fact that you understand clients and you're there for the clients is super important, and I think super undervalued and underutilized by photographers. So so actually, I'll put Richard's link in the chat, but let me his bio is so short. I'll just read it to you. In these times of digital saturation, how do we grab people's attention and direct them to what we want them to see? I don't have all the answers, but over the past 30 years, I've learned that collaborating with creatives and clients that share the same end goal is key to a successful commission, where clear and concise discussions and decision-making, be it on location or in the studio, will produce results that are honest, progressive, and with a production value everybody can feel proud of. So that is a super short, concise bio, like sort of about page that sort of simultaneously says a lot about him without, he's not really talking about himself directly. He's talking about himself indirectly. He's sort of talking directly to clients like, hey, I'm speaking your language. Especially with high-end clients who are counting on a photographer to be sophisticated and to look out for their interests and to deliver images that are going to make them look good to their boss and that they're going to make their company look good to their customers. That's what sophisticated clients are looking for, is somebody who has that same sophistication that they have and their upper management has. And so I think the more that photographers can express that they understand their own clients in their bios, the better.
Yeah, 1000% I agree. I think that's awesome. Thanks, Bill. Very good. Well, thank you very much, everyone, for joining us today. Varun, Victoria, thank you so much for all your advice and great words on how to use words. And please, anyone email us if they have questions or would like Varun and Victoria's help with working on some bios or other words. Thank you so much, everyone. Hope everyone has a great day. Also, we'll stick around for a little bit more too if people have any additional questions.
Yeah, I'll be able to stick around also if anybody wants to talk about anything about Wonderful Machine. Sorry, Brian, I can't tell sometimes whether sometimes it feels like the audio is not working.
Oh no, I'm sorry. I just had that little pregnant pause there instead of saying yes, Bill, please. But I thought that was totally perfect advice. I mean, that's exactly what Varun was saying. It's just that, and Victoria, like, hey, all these words are helping us to talk to clients, how to communicate better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I had to step out for a few minutes in the middle, but I don't know whether you guys covered one of the other sort of key things I think about in terms of the way photographers can use words to make money is writing a smart licensing agreement. I think a lot of photographers are intimidated by the whole notion of licensing agreements and negotiating. And I think it's a skill, just like making pictures, in terms of the creative and the technical. I think learning how to use language to craft a licensing agreement on paper and to be able to talk about the licensing business, the licensing model of photography is super important. And knowing when to say no to a job. All these things are about sort of listening carefully and then communicating clearly and concisely. Like one of the big mistakes I see photographers make a lot is just licensing sort of everything, sort of like all, we think of putting boxes around licensing. So you're either gonna, and you wanna, the trick to a licensing agreement is giving the client what they need, but not giving the client more than what they need. So you want to limit some amount of time or the number of pictures, or the way the pictures are being used, or the territory, the geographical territory. But you want to think about what are the limits? What are reasonable limits to put on the pictures? and then have that written clearly into the agreement, which allows you to, at a later date, come back and get additional licensing fees because if the pictures are successful, the client's going to want to use more pictures, or they're going to want to use them longer, or they're going to want to use them in Europe instead of just the United States. And a lot of photographers just sort of throw their hands up and say, okay, you can use the pictures any way you want. And I think they cost themselves a lot of money. I once had what I perceived to be a very low budget client years ago. It was literally a local pick your own farm in suburban Philadelphia, and we ended up in short agreeing to $2,500 for the day. This is 20 years ago. $2,500 for the day for 4 final images. So I went in there and spent 9 or 10 hours on site and made 1 million pictures. And part of the agreement was after 4 pictures, each additional picture would be $750. So they ended up licensing the 4, and then they subsequently came back and licensed 7 more pictures. So instead of a $2,500 day, it was a $7,500 day. And if I had sent them an estimate initially for $7,500, I would not have gotten the job. But by limiting the number of pictures, they got what they needed. They got what they thought they needed initially, but it incentivized me to work hard to create a lot of high quality pictures, and they were very happy to spend the extra money because they saw the value in that. And so I think it's really important for photographers to learn, and it comes through practice. You know, you've got to be courageous enough to put that out there and to sort of haggle over these things and discuss it, and in a way, you know, and I think sometimes photographers feel like if they put up any resistance at all, they're not going to get the job. But I didn't find that to be true. I mean, I was a commercial photographer for 25 years. I did not find that to be true. I found that if you sounded like you knew what you're talking about, and if you in fact did know what you're talking about, you know, clients would respect that. And there, in many cases, I was able to convert clients who formerly were just used to getting everything. I was able to convert them to paying me for licensing.
That's good.
There's one quick funny story. If anybody's ever read any Michael Lewis books, Michael Lewis is famous for writing The Blind Side and Liar's Poker, and Moneyball. But his first book was Liar's Poker, and he talks about his first job as a bond salesman at Salomon Brothers in New York, I guess in the late 70s, early 80s, and he talked about as a bond salesman, he felt like sometimes he was talking into one end of the phone and money was just pouring out the other side of the phone. And I think that that's what sales is. Sometimes I hear photographers say, yeah, I got on the phone with the client, and they, you know, I sent them a bid for $8,000, and they said, well, can you do it for $6,000? And the photographer's like, well, okay. All right, so imagine if you could make $2,000 in 5 minutes. You know, wouldn't you do that? You know, so like, you know, you got to understand that the person on the other end of the phone, their job is to make $2,000 in 5 minutes. And I think every day photographers are losing $2,000 in 5 minutes because they just don't know what to say when the client says, "Oh, can you do it for $6,000?" So I think practicing, you know, thinking about what to say and practicing and sort of standing up for yourself is how you make money.
And Bill and I talked about this too. If you say yes, I can do it for $6,000. That just says to that person on the other end of the phone that you don't know how to price your work, and you're not a good business person because you just, or that
you're trying to rip them off for $8,000 to begin with.
Yeah,
right. That's why a lot of negotiations, the important thing is to found numbers in reality on some kind of system of estimating or Because it then does sound like you're guessing. at
Right,
value.
and it's, you know, the things, the reality would be their image count, if it's not just all were created, you know, on a hard drive. And the other realities would be the licensing terms that you're giving them. So if it's $8,000 for a hard drive full of photos for 3 years, you say, okay, I can do $6,000, but you only have it for a year. You know, it's another $2,000 to get those additional 2 years worth. Or some kind of, you know, you need to be able to take something away from the table to lower rate, not just say yes. You know, there's the, and you don't want to take it out of your expenses also, because those are the things you need to get the shoot done. And you're probably already pretty tight on those. I mean, you know, let's assume the expenses are pretty basic on a $8,000 shoot. You have an assistant, a Digitech, some mileage, a couple hamburgers and coffee, and parking, and, you know, maybe $200 for camera gear. How are you going to lose $2,000 from that? You know, you need that stuff to make the shoot happen. So yeah, it's good to be able to pull something back from the table instead of just saying, yes, I'll give you a discount.
Hey guys, I had a question, and this is great. What about the words for raising prices? Because, you know, I've been doing this for long enough now, and lucky enough to have some clients that have been around for a while. So sometimes the raising your rates question, you know, conversation can be really difficult, because, you know, you've got this relationship with them. They've gotten accustomed to getting something for a certain price. And you realize that, you know, maybe at the time when you signed them, you were being a little generous, or just, you know, cost of living. It just, from what you're actually delivering to them, it's, you know, there's a little bit more value in there. So sometimes, like, I feel that there's always that question, like, you know, you do risk losing them as a client. You know, if they say, okay, well, this is all I'm willing to pay. How do you guys typically deal with that kind of a thing when it comes to just approaching people for that?
How much money are we talking about? Are we talking about like double, or just, you know, like, give me an
I
example.
would say like 30% at least, in that
Yeah.
range.
I think that,
You know,
that's worth having a conversation about. If the, you know, equating it to Starbucks, if you went in and saw that they raised their cup of coffee prices 30%, you know, it's, do you want that or not? You know, that's a conversation you need to have with the client. If what they're asking for is exactly the same. If something has changed, if it's more images, or if it's a longer licensing term, or if you have bigger expenses, but if it's just your fees for what you're delivering, then yeah, you need to have that conversation. It sounds like you're talking about one specific client, not just your work across the board.
right? Yeah, no, it's one specific client. I mean, there's a couple others that I probably could have that conversation with, but there's one in particular that, you know, I have a feeling that if I do have the conversation, it could be the end of the run.
Yeah. Well, I think I think it's a fair conversation to have. I mean, you know, bringing it home to Wonderful Machine, a year ago, we lowered our membership prices. And then just in the last couple of months, we raised them up somewhat again. And
Well, let me give you a prime example, not to cut you off. And I do appreciate that you guys did that, because the timing of that was excellent. You know, this client, for example, I do stills for them. And I was doing a little bit of video work, but then they actually hired like a true kind of DP, whatever. The DP brings a whole bunch of his buddies. And recently on a shoot, or on a couple of shoots, one of the buddies, his assistants, started, you know, shot a bunch of stills. And then the client was like, oh, I'll just use that guy's stills. So instead of bringing me out to do the stills portion of that location shoot, because it splits between studio and location, they just use this kid's photos, which
Right.
are incongruous with the stuff that I deliver. So that's why I'm saying, like, if I just go in there, I mean, you know, it's one of those kind of words of a thing. You know, the Starbucks analogy I think is excellent, but he's like, well, I could just go into the bodega and get $1 coffee and I'm still caffeinated.
Exactly.
So
There's
if
always,
you
there's
don't
always
care
gonna
about
be,
quality,
yeah, I mean, there's always going to be someone who will do the work for less than you. The quality is probably not going to be as good. But yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's most photographers' work. We've seen that when they don't get a job, it's because, the client hired their, nephew's son or something. It's just, and to save money. You can, I think you can drive yourself mad worrying about that. In this situation where someone else on set basically, I mean, I look at that DP's assistant as stealing her job. I mean, they
Yeah.
took pictures on your set and sold them to the client when that was your job. That's not cool at all. I've seen assistants do the same thing, email clients from a call sheet afterwards and say, hey, I know how much you paid the photographer I just worked for on the shoot. Hit me up next time. I'm going to do it for half that price. And that it's not cool.
the thing is, like, my client, he's not educated on this. He's just looking to kind of close the endpoints.
Yeah, I
So
would.
if he can get the same.
I would.
So Adam, I think that there's two issues here. One is if you only want to raise your rate if you're willing to lose the client.
Right.
So I think sometimes photographers somehow feel entitled to certain prices because I think photographers in general tend to inflate when they share money with each other. They tend to, double what they actually get or talk about rates in terms of what you should get. But I mean, ultimately the market is going to reveal your value. And you have to be comfortable. You have to be busy enough with other clients to be comfortable saying, hey, I'm, my rate is now this. But I think first and foremost, if you do want to keep the client, you want to have modest increases, because if you have frankly, I think 30%, unless you've had that rate for the last 20 years, I think 30%, you probably would lose the client. The client, even if the client might perceive that as, okay, they just don't want to work with me anymore. But so I think to that end, you want to be careful when you're saying that you're raising your rates. You want to start by saying how much you enjoy working with them, and that that your costs have increased over the years, and you have to provide some sort of justification. But in the end, it's up to you as a business owner to charge whatever you want. And if they're a business person, they're going to respect the fact that you are in charge of setting your own rates, and you need to but ultimately they're going to decide whether they can work with you or not.
Sure. I mean, this is like a very specific thing. Obviously you guys called it, but look, there's a few others that I wouldn't mind kind of bumping them up like incrementally, but they're so, whatever. But it's good information. I like that. I love the Starbucks equation, because it's true. You walk into Starbucks and your $5 coffee is $6. Do you walk out, or do you just pay the $6?
The Starbucks equation works
different
too when joking about clients too, where you're like, hey, so I need 10 coffees. I know they're $3 each, but I only have $4. Can I still get 10 coffees? And also I'm going to pay you in net 45 to 60. We're not sure. Send me an invoice. We'll go from there. And you get laughed out of the store. But yeah, it sounds like I think we hit the nail on the head. You just want to have this conversation with the client. It sounds like you have a relationship with them and say, hey guys, look, you guys have been locking this rate for a long time. But at the same time too, it sounds like this is a smaller one, but I've done a lot of photography for Warner Brothers Records, probably, a dozen, 15 shoots. And each one of those has a separate budget, depending on that artist's marketing plan, depending on the size of that artist, depending on what they're using the photos for. Are these just publicity photos? Is this merchandise? Is this album packaging? So that's something to think about too. Like where the client is Warner Brothers, each project has, could have a different number associated with it as well. Right.
And if you don't mind, another question. You guys were talking about terms. Some of the terms that I send to clients, are kind of generalized. Some of them are very specific, but are you guys recommending like having like just like a kind of a general terms and conditions sheet that goes to every with every job that a client has to sign off on?
Yep. Yeah, with every estimate.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And that
yeah, that's something I probably could use some help with. I mean, so much of what I've done is through nepotism, you know, but there's a lot of like new stuff that's been kind of coming in, thankfully, knock on wood. Some of it is, you know, editorial, so it's like very specified, you know, they have contracts that kind of are, but it would be very good for me to work on coming up with some of these kind of core things in a more formalized manner.
Mm-hmm.
So I should probably hit you guys offline for that.
And you can look at our pricing and negotiating articles and get a start on that. Just
I
to
love
see
those.
what's in there.
I've been looking at those for years.
But I mean,
those
you
are
want to
awesome.
you want to specify, you know, how long until they pay you, and maybe most importantly, you want to specify your limit of liability. That if something goes wrong, your liability is limited by the value of the job, which means that if you fuck up the job, they just won't pay you. They're not going to sue you for more money. And also liability in terms of indemnification is very important. So if they use the pictures in some way that puts you at legal risk, that they're gonna protect you. They're gonna indemnify you and hold you harmless in the event that somebody sues you because of something that they did. And you likewise need to indemnify them, so that if you do something, like if your light stand falls over and hits somebody on the head, you're gonna be covered with your insurance on that. They're not gonna be held liable for something that you do to put them in jeopardy.
Right.
The big one,
worst case scenario stuff.
The big one also to add in there too is cancellations or postponements. And that is, you know, if they're cancellations or postponement from the client, then the client's responsible for those fees for you and your crew, or any, you know, locations you may have rented, or any talent you may have secured. Just who's in charge of that. Yeah, I think is something that's really good to have in there, because that's something we see a lot too. Is then, you know, something happens, client's sick, client doesn't want to postpone their vacation after all, or you know, there's a lot of money on the line. Sometimes it needs to get moved around.
Cool.
Yeah. Craig and I went bike riding last night, and we were joking around. He hadn't seen it, but I was telling him, you guys seen The Sopranos when Tony puts a deposit on the beach house, and then he and Carmela start going through a divorce. So he wants his deposit back, but it's like $250,000 in cash, and the guy wouldn't give it to him. So he ends up parking a boat in the harbor outside the beach house, just blasting music all night long until the guy's finally like, I've had it, here's your money back. But, you know, that makes for great TV, but that was a cash deal and they didn't have a contract in place.
Right.
So, you know, it's you don't want to be blasting music out of a boat, Adam. You just want to have paperwork that says, hey, here's my feeling.
I got a guy though, so covered. That's good advice.
Love it. All right, guys. Well, I'm going to jump off here. I got to pick the kids up from school.
Okay. Great job,
I feel like
Vicky.
if I leave,
Thank you.
I feel like
Great
if I
job,
leave, it may kick everyone else off.
That's cool. Thanks, everybody.
Bye,
Nice to see
everybody.
you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank
Have a
you.
great day.